Danielle, you may have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, sorry, I was just getting that worked out. And can you remind me, sorry, how to see what you all see?
Up at the top of the menu bar.
At the top of the menu bar?
Yep, got it. Great. So, hi everyone, I am Danielle Tuft, like they mentioned. I am the Sexual Violence Prevention Program Manager for the Sexual Violence Program at CDPHE. We are going to, there you go. Great, everyone can see it. So we are going to be talking a little bit, and with me I have Jocelyn Hernandez, who's actually our youth advisor, and I'm really excited to have her join us today. And we're going to talk a little bit about positive youth development, the approach, and then sexual violence prevention. So just to start off, I wanted to talk a little bit about what the Sexual Violence Prevention Program is and does. So our goal is actually to prevent first-time sexual violence perpetration by youth during adolescence and young adulthood. So, whoops, sorry about that. So we focus on ages 12 to 25 in Colorado. We prioritize communities of color, indigenous populations, immigrant, LGBT, and rural. Currently, we fund 9 nonprofit organizations or agencies. So 8 of those organizations focus on the primary prevention of sexual violence through various different programming. So it could look like healthy relationship education in the school system, youth-adult connectedness or affable adult training, social norm campaigning. All of our grantees also have to work on a policy issue, so they either choose to work on institutionalizing comprehensive sex education into Colorado schools, or they focus on trying to ensure that each of their schools has a bullying or anti-harassment policy, specifically in which there is an enumeration for LGBT population and students. Additionally, we actually have another project as well with Sources of Strength, which is an evidence-based suicide prevention program. So we've been piloting that. We're on to our 2nd year in 7 schools throughout Colorado and actually measuring if it has impact on sexual violence based on its focus on youth connectedness to adults and to their school, which has been shown to be a protective factor for both suicide as well as sexual violence. So we have a couple different things going on, and like I said, we have 9 organizations, and so part of today we'll be talking a little bit of what we've learned through how they've implemented positive youth development in their work. So we'll go on to that. I also just sort of wanted to set the scene for what we're talking about today. Our organization focuses solely on primary prevention. So these are approaches that are used before sexual violence occurs to prevent initial perpetration. So like I mentioned before, this could look like life skills or healthy relationship curricula, building safe environments. So for example, focusing on positive school climate or something in that realm. And just because there's a lot of terminology questions sometimes out there, just to go through it, secondary prevention, or sometimes it's called intervention, is really the immediate activities directly after sexual violence occurs. So this is maybe crisis counseling or provision of shelter. And then tertiary prevention in terms of sexual violence would be long-term activities after sexual violence has occurred. So long-term counseling or offender treatment. So just as a reminder, today we're really going to be talking about this primary prevention piece. So we're going to be talking about how do you use positive youth development in approaches to prevent first-time perpetration of sexual violence. Great. So before we move on to the next slide, I just have a request for some polls, or a poll. I'm going to launch that. So what I'd like is if anyone has attended a positive youth development training in the past, if you can say yes or no. It could be a CDPHE one or something else you've done. Great. So with that, we can see that a significant number of you guys haven't. So that's great. What today will offer you is just sort of a brief overview of what positive youth development is. My hope is that all of you will take advantage of some free trainings that exist throughout Colorado and learn a little bit more, because we definitely won't be going into significant depth. But it will give you sort of an idea on how it will be relevant for some sexual violence work that I'm sure everyone is doing. Great. So back to our presentation. So positive youth development is, in Colorado, it's actually, well, throughout the country, it's an evidence-based approach that guides communities and organizations in a way that they organize their services, their opportunities, and their supports so that all youth can be engaged and reach their full potential. So what this really means is developing skills, opportunities, and authentic relationships for or with youth. This is sort of the key piece around positive youth development. Colorado has our own youth-wide system, or statewide youth system, and we have some of our own terminology and things like that. So that's what we're going to go through and focus in on and how we do it. So this is sort of the what: skills, opportunities, authentic relationships, sort of what. Then this is the how. So what you'll see is in the middle you have skills, opportunities, and authentic relationships. And like I mentioned before, that's the what. But these puzzle pieces around are actually the how. So how do you actually develop these skills, opportunities, and authentic relationships with young people? So the different things, and we'll be talking about these as well, but are strengths-based, inclusive, youth as partners, collaborative, and sustainable. And the idea is that with all of these, you ultimately will inform your programs, practices, and policies. Great. So we're going to go ahead and jump right in. And like I said, we're going to be somewhat brief, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jocelyn to talk a little bit about what this looks like in practice for sexual violence prevention. But so strengths-based is really about taking a holistic approach, focusing on strengths of young people or the community around them, and actually building them up. So what this looks like is really strengths exploration, so providing opportunities for young people to explore strengths that they want to build or things that they're already interested in. Skill development, so I think that's a little clear what that means, but basically, again, providing the opportunities for young people to actually practice these strengths and to build skills. And then a holistic approach, so appreciating that sort of using a whole person approach and realizing that the individual that walks into your organization or agency, there's a lot more to them than what you maybe see just when they walk in. They don't exist in a vacuum of your programs, and so there's a lot that they experience in their community or in their homes that really impact how you will ultimately engage with them. So then the next one is inclusive, and this really addresses needs of youth by ensuring that your approach is culturally responsive. So the big factors around this are accessibility. So can people get to your organization or your agency? Physical safety. So is not only are the people, your staff, safe adults that you can access, but also is your office environment or the environment directly outside of your office physically safe. So lighting or crosswalks or things like that. And then social emotional safety, which again is just like a welcoming environment, so ensuring that when young people walk into your office, it feels like a place that is accessible to young people and is welcoming of young people. Affordability, again, what are the cost measures, or what are the costs to access your services or your prevention programming? And then equity, so making sure that everyone can access these things in an equitable manner. And again, we'll go through these a little bit more in terms of what they look like in practice. So then youth as partners, I think this is a really big component of positive youth development that a lot of people already do, and it's oftentimes the one thing people are like, oh yeah, we do PYD, we use youth as partners, but it's really just one of 5 big principles. But it's really about being intentional and meaningful and creating sustained involvement of youth in your programs, practices, and policies. And so this looks different in different ways, and everyone engages youth differently. But the basics around it is you want youth input, so creating a system that allows for youth to engage and provide feedback into your programming or services. And then one step beyond that is the shared decision making. So beyond just being able to say, like, yes, I like this or I don't like this, actually having distinct or explicit roles for young people to make decisions with the adults within your organization. So deciding, what this funding should go towards, or what kind of person should be hired in this role. And we'll talk more about that as well. And then lastly, just creating these really authentic relationships. And this is tied back a lot to what we were talking around accessibility. And this is just a big piece of making sure you're building true positive relationships between the adults and the young people in your offices or young people that you serve. And then we have collaborative. So again, somewhat basic, but creating partnerships within and across sectors to effectively align work. So this is twofold. So one is caring adults. So a big piece of this is oftentimes we get young people, but we don't necessarily service, especially in prevention, because we're working in schools, we don't necessarily service the people in their lives. So a big part of positive youth development is bringing those caring adults, so parents, caregivers, teachers, back into the programming that you are offering these young people and connecting them with them and engaging them. Because again, when you're doing, for example, sexual violence prevention with a young person, you want to make sure that when they go home at night that they're receiving additional positive information, or it's supplementing what they're learning as part of this prevention program. And then the other part is community partners. So again, just recognizing that a lot of these issues, violence and things related to violence don't happen in vacuums, and there's a lot of connections between our community partners. And so really finding ways to create comprehensive connections so that our young people can access all of us and that we're all communicating in a shared process. And then our last principle is sustainable. So this is really about long-term planning. Oftentimes we talk about it in terms of funding, trainings, capacity building, or professional development and evaluation. So it's about ongoing support. So ensuring that you have budgets in place to ensure that positive youth development continues, to ensure that you have professional development opportunities for adults so that they understand how best to work with young people. And this is a continuous thing. So that's the key piece of the sustainability or the sustainable principle, is that it's not a one-time thing. It's not one cultural competency training and you're culturally competent. It's a long-term set of opportunities for professional development and capacity building around engaging young people. And then evaluation for continuous improvement. So having an evaluation process or plan in your organization, whether that is process evaluation, so evaluating how well you're doing things, or actually doing an outcome evaluation, so how well are you meeting the outcomes or the goals of your program. So these are really big pieces, and young people are sort of involved and intertwined in all of these principles, which we'll talk about as well. So with that, I'm going to switch it over to Jocelyn, who is going to share a little bit about why all this is important and sort of what we've experienced in using PYD with our sexual violence prevention organization.
Hi all, I'm Jocelyn Hernandez, and I am currently the youth advisor for CDPHE here, and then also for CDHS for the TGYS programming over there. And then I'm going to start off with why is positive youth development important? Program policies and practices that impact youth should be influenced and driven by youth voices and experiences. So who better to ask about youth issues than the youth themselves? This way you ensure that their needs and their wants are being heard and then are also being addressed by your organization. When you involve youth in the conversations, they have a stronger sense of being involved, which means that they take ownership for the organization, and that just skyrockets how invested they are in your programming. And when you have these conversations with youth, a lot or the majority of youth already have these opinions, already have these voices. They just need guidance into how to put those voices and opinions and perspectives to use. So before I go into how can we use each PYD principle, I just want to let everybody know that the following bullet points come from the sexual violence prevention grantees. So it's from those examples, but then some of the examples that I'm going to speak about are personal experiences, experiences that I've seen between siblings and friends, and then also things that I've noticed when I go on site visits to see these grantees from both organizations here at CDPHE and at CDHS. So how can we use this strengths-based? Peer-developed and led curriculum. So I am part of a law enforcement organization, and we are responsible for coming up with our own training guideline. We meet once a week, and when I'm asked, what do you want to learn, what do you feel is important to be included in this set schedule, that gives me so much power into saying, this is what's important to me, this is what I feel I need help in, this is what I feel confident in, or confident enough to teach others in, and that just takes away so much of the, like, takes away a lot from the plate of the staff members, because they know that the students are vested in it and they're taking things out of this program. So then going on that, life skills and healthy relationship skill development, there's a grantee where one of their staff members is a part-time DJ. They've brought in their DJ equipment. They not only got the students engaged with learning how to use it, and then they were able to teach other students how to use it, but then also they were able to go into the community and DJ for weddings, for parties, for community events, and then that taught these students all of the skills involved in how to manage their time wisely. They need to get there in time, set everything up, and then tear everything down at the end of the night. They taught them budget because of how much money are they going to charge for these services, and then how much is needed to maintain their equipment. And those are life skills that they're going to use forever. Whether they go into DJing or not, these are skills that we're going to follow us. And then you have programming reflective of youth culture. So I believe that every single generation has created their own terminology on what you use for your relationships, what you call your boyfriends and girlfriends, and this new generation is no different. I have younger siblings, ages 13 and 16, and sometimes they come home and say words that I don't even understand. So when you have that conversation that goes both ways, you'll be able to take out old terminology and then put in the new one, and that's going to be an evolving process. And then lastly, you have student strengths recognized and utilized in curriculum facilitation. So for that one, it's more of looking at the youth that you have in your room and then asking them, how do you want this role play to look, or what do you want these characters to look like? Because they're already vested in it, they're already involved in it, and it's now just, if you need to get to an outward goal, how do you get them involved in creating this curriculum in the first place? Because the more they're involved, the more vested in they're going to be in it. Next we have, how can we use inclusiveness? Staff engages with young people regarding preferred terminology, for example, gender pronouns. You have to, some youth will identify male, female, transgender. They'll want their pronouns to reflect that he, she, they, them, and you won't know what it is that they prefer until you ask them. Then you have organizational policies. So an example of that is the gender-neutral bathrooms. So that is a huge sexual violence prevention goal, which also touches on inclusivity. And then you have staff as representative of community and young people. When you have these young people coming into your organizations, does your staff look like them? If it's yes, then that's ideally how it should be, because you feel comfortable, with your own, and if your young people go into your organization and the staff members look like them, it's so much easier to create those relationships with them already. And then you have youth identities and experiences are captured in the program practices and policies. So a negative example that I have with somebody that wasn't inclusive was in high school, there was an organization that came into our school to give us college help, how to write college applications, how to write college scholarships, and a friend of mine is undocumented, and this organization told her that she shouldn't even look at college, she should just look into the workforce now. And that, even though she didn't show it at the moment, that was extremely detrimental. She, pretty much these people in an organization which are empowered to affect these young people's lives, like a lot of you are, just shut her down and totally excluded that whole demographic out. That's an example of what not to do. Next, we have youth partners. This one is my personal favorite because with youth ownership of programming and organizations, for that law enforcement organization that I'm in, just in common conversations between me and my other team members, when we talk about the organization or about the group, we say this is my program, this is my group, this is how much money we fundraise. Like, we have complete ownership of it. We know that we helped create it and we helped change it and drive it. And that just means everybody's even more vested and excited to be there than somebody that doesn't talk about the program as if they own it. And that leads into positions for youth leadership. Because in that program, I am currently in charge of that organization, and that's only because that program allowed me to. They gave me all the tools and skill sets to do it, and then now I'm helping younger youth to one day take my position. And that's hopefully the goal for a lot of your organizations. And then another very clear example is what I'm doing right now as a youth advisor for the state government. That is a new idea that hasn't been heard of before. And my coworkers, my supervisors, they have given me the opportunity to present my perspectives, to present my voice, to actually make me feel like a partner and like what I'm saying matters. And that is huge in how vested I am in this organization and in any group that youth would be involved in. Next, you have youth directly influence content adaptations or development of programming. There's a grantee who sat down with their group and they came up with scenarios which the goal of them was how to foster healthy relationships. What to do if you encounter a negative or a controlling relationship. And they got together and they said, how can we make these scenarios more realistic towards you? And having that input from them was huge in those scenarios being successful in the first place. And then lastly, you have youth-driven policy work. Youth-driven policy work is so important because if you have all of these foundations, all of these building blocks where these students feel like they own and they work for this organization, when they go to their principal, to their and all the way up to their state legislator, they'll be able to say, this is how this program has affected me. This is my positive or my lack of comprehensive sex education, and this is how it affected me today. This is how it affected me in my K through 12 education, and this is why I want things to change for future generations. And it's so important to get this perspective from young people, because who else is going to tell you what it feels like to be in their shoes and them? Next, we have collaborative. So how Danielle mentioned that no one organization is the sole organization that youth are involved in, and going on that, there's no organization that's going to be charged with solving all of the issues either. They all have to work together, they all have to connect with each other, and they don't only have to be for sexual violence prevention goals, because there are also other grantees who they give these foundations, but then they give warm handoffs from the youth to other organizations that help with college applications, job applications, like any service that you know that you're not capable of providing, it's giving them an avenue for where to go. And then you have, I think that connects well with the bridge related to funding your community work, because they're not going to be just vested in your organization. And for the last one, the leverage network of young people across organizations, you might have one young person who's really active, really motivated, and in multiple organizations. They're the ones that are going to be able to bring in more young people to your program. And then you start creating this network of young people who all of a sudden are aware of all of these programs. Like, this program is helping me with sexual violence prevention, and it's helping me with what a healthy relationship is. This program is helping me with college work. This program is helping me find a career that I didn't even know was available to me. And then you create a network within all of these young people because you want to get your word out. You want to get your name out to all the young people that could potentially need you. And then lastly, we have sustainable. Professional development opportunities. So this is very important when it comes to your staff members, because how before I mentioned how it's so much easier to create that relationship if your staff look like your youth. If your staff don't look like your youth, that's not a problem. It's only a problem if you don't know how to be culturally competent and how to talk with these students. Just like in my program, a lot of our advisors are Hispanic, so that's easy. But then one of my advisors is she is Japanese, and that has created like such a huge bond, and I get to learn from her just as much as she gets to learn from me. So it's just being really informed, being really prepared, and being really open both ways. And that would include being PYD, going to PYD trainings, being trauma informed. And this is where you differentiate. For the budget for youth employment and our youth engagement is where you differentiate organizations that say, we're here for youth and our youth are here at the table, but you only have one youth at the table, or you don't have them in the budget, you don't have an official position for them, to organizations that they say, this is my paid youth advisor, we have 2 or 3 of them, this is how our budget looks to be able to keep them on for a year, 2 years, 3 years. And that's what differentiates how sustainable it is for these youth to be at your organization. And that goes into youth, including hiring, program development, and training. Because it would be a goal that when you're trying to hire new staff or develop programming, all of these programmings and these staff are going to interact with these youth. So who better to have at the table than the youth that are already there? Because they're going to be able to give you an insight to what they need and who they would like to be there. And at the end is youth co-led evaluation processes. I think this is really important to be able to fix those gaps, because when an organization looks at how they serve these young people, they might say, well, we're really good at being accessible and at being affordable, and we're really good at these things, but we're not so great over here. And then when you ask the youth, they have an opposite view of what's going on. And when you get those, that's the first step in being able to address those problems, or being able to address those parts where your organization might lack in, or you might think that you lack in a certain area and the youth are like, no, it's always been great and I feel totally welcome here, and you won't be able to get either side of that story without asking them first. I think that pretty much sums up my how can we use this portion.
Great. So before we move on, we're going to talk a little bit about so when we move on, we're going to be talking a little bit about some tools that you can use for this. But I kind of wanted to reiterate the connection between all of this. And so the reality is we, as an entity that's working towards primary prevention, and really we focus on trying to prevent initial perpetration. We obviously do prevention of victimization as well, but are really, really fascinated with this idea of preventing perpetration. But the reality is a lot of this happens when people are young, and by young people as well. And so our goal is to really work with that age group I mentioned before, 12 to 25, because we really want to be focusing on getting people before it's a problem, right? Before they're perpetrating, before they're victims. And so that's kind of where this PYD piece works in. So all of our programming is highly, highly engaging of young people, and that's a really big piece of sexual violence prevention. And so that's what we're focusing on, and that's why we're using the PYD approach. What moving on we're going to talk about is a PYD in action tool. So actually, before I get there, I have a question. So considering some of these pieces, we talked the 5 indicators of strength-based, inclusive, youth engaged as partners, sustainable, and collaborative. Do you all have examples in your organizations or agencies about how you're already doing some of this youth development as part of your sexual violence work. Okay, well, it doesn't look so, but maybe we'll have an opportunity to talk about it a little bit more as we continue. So now we're going to talk about this PYD tool. So this tool was created, and I'll talk about a little bit about the development in a minute, but it's basically a user-friendly online tool. Its intent, having technical difficulties on my end. Its intent is to really focus on how to apply, how to practice the positive youth development approach. It's an opportunity to learn from partners and really assess your organization's work using the PYD approach. So really thinking about where you are at in your positive youth development and sort of where you can move within it to strengthen it. It fosters reflection, discussion, and continuous improvement for youth-serving entities. So for the development, the tool is actually created in conjunction or in coordination with CDPHE, so the RSVP program, Sexual Violence Prevention Program, CDHS's Tony Gramsci's Youth Services Program, as well as our youth-serving organizations that we support. We pulled it off of existing research. So the way it worked is we brought a bunch of youth-serving organizations together. So in our case, it was sexual violence. In TGYS, it was a mix of violence prevention or early childhood. And we brought them together to look at the existing research about what is positive youth development, and then really tell us what it will, okay, so this is what the research says, but how do you all practice it in your communities? What do you all do? And so with that, it was also co-created with young people. So we brought in all of the young youth participants of the organizations to come and help generate authentic practices. So we really wanted this to be co-created and something that was relevant or resonated with both young people and adults. So the content, we're going to switch over in a minute and I'll walk through the website with you, but just so you sort of have an idea behind it, you'll see that it has all 5 principles we've talked about, as well as the 15 indicators that we mentioned briefly. But then important other things to know about or think about when using the tool is that it's really using strengths-based language. It's really focused on that piece of it. It's not meant to be punitive. So it was developed originally because we needed something to sort of evaluate where people were with positive youth development. But the intent is not to be punitive, like, oh, you're not doing this, so you get a mark down. It's really about trying to determine where you're at and how you can support your growth towards something bigger. Also into that is that continuous improvement piece. And then the last part is that it's a living document or a living website as the case. It was originally a document and now it's a website. But we built it off of community organizations' input and want to continue building off. So as positive youth development looks different, or as Colorado changes, or young people in Colorado as the culture changes, we want to ensure that the website and the content is still relevant to what that looks like and how it's practiced in our community. So we'll talk about that a little bit more as well. So let's go ahead and explore it. Let's see. This should work. Yep. Okay. So what you will see on our PYD website is on the front page when you get there. And again, we have the website. It's up here as well, and we can send that out later. But you have the website. So this first page is going to walk you through, sort of briefly like I did, what PYD is. And then it also has a section for how to use this website. You also can go, if you want to learn more about, like I mentioned, the development of the tool, why it was created, you can learn that here. But the big piece of it is that you'll see across the top, we have our 5 main principles. So these principles, the hope is that at some point you'll review all 5 of them and sort of look at how your organization is doing both strengths-based, inclusive, youth as partners, and et cetera. But it's not necessarily linear. So if your organization is just really interested in figuring out, where are we with youth as partners? How well are we doing shared decision making, for example? So we'll go there. You can actually do it this way. So you can sort of pick and choose how you want to use this website. But in this case, we go to shared decision making, and what you see on the left is the definition of what this means. And then we have our spectrum. So like I said, it's not a check mark, yes or no punitive system. It's where am I at and where can I go? So starting here, sort of at the farthest left level is planting, and the expectation or hope is that organizations will get towards blossoming. So each growing and blossoming builds off the section ahead of it. So you can go through it and say, okay, well, do youth currently influence our decision making? Like, how does that happen? Are expectations clear to prepare youth for certain things? And you can go through each of these. And what you'll probably find is that you're doing pieces throughout. So you may do one component that is planting and another component that's growing, and even maybe something that's blossoming as well. You might be at totally different places. So again, it's really not linear, but it gives you an idea of where you can sort of move towards. And these are still fairly general, these pieces here. But if you scroll down, we collected, again, examples, I guess you could say real-life examples of what this actually means for a youth-serving organization and what it looks like. And so if you scroll down here and over these, you'll see, like, for example, having youth on governance boards. Or even potentially language or practices you can use with young people that would meet sort of these growing section. So for example, remember when our youth leader said this, therefore we should do this. So sort of ensuring that it's not just about, it's not a one-way feedback loop, but there's also a secondary comprehensive component where you actually utilize what they've told you. And then as an example, lastly would be, youth leadership or staff positions. So for example, for us, having Jocelyn as a youth advisor would be meeting this piece. Great, and then like I said, this is really a living document, so we really want people to provide their suggestions to it. So we have this part right here, which is add your own example. Making sure, yep, that went with you guys, so you can all see it. So this actually just takes you to a form, and you can list your organization, and you can tell us what something looks like to you. So maybe there's something here that you do differently or you do in addition to. And so if you send us that, we will contact you and talk about adding it to our website and figuring out the best way to represent your activities for your organization. So we're really excited about that. And like I said, we really want this to continue to grow. We don't want it to be like, oh, this was created in 2015 and 5 years from now no one uses it. So that's our hope. And I want to make a mention too, before I talk about resources actually, that organizations have been using this in different ways. So some people are choosing to use it as an organizational evaluation process. So going through each of these 5 pieces or 5 principles and respective indicators and actually sort of evaluating their organization. Other people have used it around how to better engage young people and talk about their organization. There are a lot of different ways you can use this tool. It can also provide, like I said, really just a jumping off point. So if you are an organization that doesn't traditionally practice youth development, but you really want to start, it gives you a foundation for what those sort of initial steps should look like. And then lastly, we have a resource page. And I actually think this is one of the really valuable pages to this website as well. And I think especially for some of you, since majority of you all haven't actually had an opportunity to be trained in youth development yet. So for starters, there's the Colorado 9 to 25 website. For those of you who may not know, it's our Colorado youth statewide system. It's a collective impact model. It's really great. It works ages 9 to 25, and there's tons and tons of resources. And it's very local based. I mean, it's all about Colorado and young people in Colorado. We have our training, so if you go to this, you'll be redirected to a page where you can sign up for our next positive youth development trainings. So down here it'll tell you when the new dates are. So right now we don't have any plans, but usually there's 3 or 4 locations and dates listed on that page. They are free. They happen usually from 9 to 3. We will come out to communities for them. So if you are not in Metro Denver, for example, we just went out to Center to do one a couple months ago. So we will go anywhere. So you just have to send an email and we will come out and do youth development trainings for your community. And then just a few documents. So again, if you are new to youth development, there's a really fantastic fact sheet. It's like a 1-2 pager, and it tells you sort of the basics and what it means to use it in Colorado. As well as, like I mentioned before, this website actually started out as a really long 15-page PDF. So if you're really enthusiastic about that, you can download the PDF version as well and sort of have a hard copy to work through your organization with. And then lastly, if you have questions, so any questions you have about PYD or requests or anything about the website, this is a link to communicate with us as well. So I think that is really all we have. I know it was a bit brief, but the hope is really to engage. And I think one of the key things about positive youth development is that, you know, we talked about it in terms of sexual violence. So for example, something that's come up a lot is safe dates being outdated. So utilizing young people to actually make relevant adaptations for safe dates. Or for comprehensive sex education, like Jocelyn mentioned, to really have these young people drive the policies in their schools, because young people have this huge, amazing voice, and oftentimes adults really listen better in certain circumstances to young people than they do adults. And we found that that actually builds a lot of traction and potential with some policy movements, even if they're little p. So something to consider. But the reality is positive youth development is far-reaching and can really work throughout. I mean, a lot of these are pretty generalized, so you can utilize this whether you're doing sexual violence or substance use and abuse or chronic disease work. I mean, really, if you are working with young people, and whether it's prevention or intervention or treatment, if you are working with young people, this website and this approach is relevant to you. So that is all we have for today. I just want to thank everyone for joining us. If there are any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box and we'll take a look.
Well, thank you so much, Danielle and Jocelyn. I wonder if anybody has any questions right now. We can give a couple minutes to ask any questions to Danielle and Jocelyn in regards of the amazing program that they have and the amazing tool of the website. If you all prefer to send it via email, that's also another way to do it. But overall, we would just like to thank our presenters and for such an amazing tool that they have created in program. I will also would like to remind everybody that at the end of the webinar, please fill out our survey, and that way you can give us some feedback about what you would like to have next time. I don't see any questions at all, so I will thank you all. Have a wonderful afternoon and a wonderful rest of the week. Thank you both, the presenters, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks.